Good morning, everybody. Please accept our most sincere apologies for you having to wait a little while there. A few technical issues which we've managed to sort out, so I do appreciate you sitting and waiting for us, and I really hope you'll be pleased that you stayed with us, and we've got lots of really great stuff for you to hear about. So good morning and welcome to Meet Your Future campaign. My name's Claire Walker and I'm part of the Education Work and Skills team at Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I'm joined today by my amazing colleague Sarah, who is behind the scenes working very hard to ensure that all the technical gear is working properly for us, so obviously you get a really good experience. For those of you who've joined us before, you might already be aware that Meet Your Future was launched in April 2019 by Andy Burnham, who is the Mayor of Greater Manchester. And this was done to enable more people like you guys to meet and connect with different businesses and employers to explore lots of different roles and careers. As you probably know, this week is National Apprenticeship Week, and our theme at Meet Your Future for that is growth in Greater Manchester. You might be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, what does that actually mean? Well, throughout this week in our Meet Your Future sessions, we'll be exploring the industries and the roles and careers that are growing very rapidly across Greater Manchester, and what opportunities that presents for you as somebody who'll be part of the workforce in the very near future. You'll be able to learn more about apprenticeships, what an apprenticeship is, and how an apprenticeship might be the option for you after you leave school or college to develop those important skills and the knowledge that you need for your future careers. In this session today, you'll hear from Gary Curzon, who's the Business Process Improvement Manager from a company called Mettler Toledo Safeline Company. Gary is also the Ambassador of Generation Logistics, which he'll talk about. We'll also hear from three young people who are currently going through an apprenticeship or who have recently finished. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Bobby, Sammy and Charlotte have to say about their own experiences. I'm really hoping the session will inform you, inspire you and highlight why you can be hopeful and optimistic about your future career in Greater Manchester. Gary's prepared a fantastic presentation for us all, and I'd really invite you to make use of the question box, which is there up on the right hand corner, for any questions or thoughts you might have throughout the session, and we'll do our very best to get them answered towards the end. On the right hand side of the screen, you can also see that there's some options there about captions and subtitles. So at any point during the event, if you need that, please get your teacher, whoever's controlling your whiteboard, to do that for you. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to hand you over to Gary from Mettler Toledo Safeline. And thanks very much for being here. Over to you, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So, hi, everybody. Welcome along to this talk about logistics. We're going to explain a little bit about what logistics is, but that'll come in the slides that are due to follow. So Generation Logistics is a industry-sponsored organisation that's looking to promote logistics to a wide range of young and diverse people from various backgrounds to try and take the industry forward. So as Claire says, my current role is Business Process Improvement Manager for a $3 billion global manufacturing company, but my 40-year career is in supply chain and logistics. So I have a lot of experience in this area. But because this is a talk aimed at attracting new people into the industry to take it forward, I have three young people joining me today to help. So I'd like to ask Sammy to perhaps introduce herself and what she does. As it says on the screen there, she's currently self-employed. Sammy.
Hi, my name is Sammy Bowler. I'm a self-employed external transport manager and heavy haulage driver. So the beginning of my journey was when I left school. I joined the family business and did my HGV driving license, and I've just progressed from there internally within the industry. So I like to transport abnormal loads, anything oversized, and I'm an external transport manager, which means I have a passion for keeping operators and haulage companies compliant.
Thank you, Sammy. Can I ask Charlotte to introduce herself, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Davis and I'm a graduate training manager at Wincanton. I graduated from university in September 2021 and decided to apply for graduate schemes, which essentially just trains you up to be a manager. You might not have heard of Wincanton specifically, but you would definitely have heard of a lot of our customers.
Thank you, Charlotte. And Bobby.
Hi, I'm Bobby Costin and I'm a customs brokerage specialist. I've been working in customs for about 5 years and I started as an apprentice myself, getting 2 qualifications in business administration. And I've gone on to become a specialist, and I'm also the chair of British International Freight Association's Young Forwarders. So I like to get young people involved, or the people who are already involved in logistics, building on their own career paths.
Thank you very much. So if we could jump to the first slide, please, Claire. So effectively what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go right back to basics to a degree and just explain a little bit about what logistics is. We're going to explain how and why it's important. We're going to talk a little bit about the careers that are on offer to young people like yourselves, and we're going to hear from the 3 panelists and how they, what their entry points were, etc. We're going to hear about that a little bit later on. And in terms of my entry, we're going to talk about that as well, but we'll do that a little bit later on. So we're going to start by asking you a question for you to sort of discuss and debate amongst yourselves. You will have the option of using the functions that Claire referred to provide an answer. So Claire, perhaps if you could jump to the first question for us on slide 1. So the question is it's a true or false question. So 1 in 20 people within the UK work in a logistics role. Have that discussion amongst yourselves, and we'll just give that a moment, and we'll see if any answers come in. And Claire, I guess you're monitoring the chat there to see if the answers come in.
Yeah, let's just give people a moment.
Yeah.
So I've got a combination coming through, some trues, some falses.
Okay, well, if you press next for me, Claire, we'll have the answer. So the answer is true. Around about 1 in 20 people work in a role that is considered logistics, either directly or maybe slightly more indirectly, and we're going to expand on that a little bit later on. That's around about 2.5 million people, something like that, around about that sort of figure at the last counting. Last figures I saw, there was something like 180,000 different logistics companies based in the UK. So around about, I think it's globally, I think it's like $1 trillion business or something like that, being involved in logistics along those sorts of lines. Can we jump to the next question then, please, Claire? So the next question is, going back to 2019, Black Friday weekend, which I think is the last weekend in November, I think, the spend online was £2 billion in this country. Again, just debate that amongst yourselves. We're looking for a true or false answer. And again, we'll give that 1 minute again, shall we, Claire?
Yeah, no problem.
See what we get.
So I've had 3 responses in, and
Okay.
they all say true.
Okay, if you just press next for me, it's actually false. So in 2019, the figures recorded were 8 billion. Now, if you consider that was pre-pandemic, when pretty much you could mask-free go and wander around a shop and buy stuff, more people in 2020 and 2021 and 2022 now have actually been buying online. So that figure is probably somewhere closer to 10 to 12 billion, I guess, of products being moved around online. Okay, can we go to the third and final question, please? So the third question is that 90% of everything traded around the world travels by ship. So think about where a lot of products may originate and where they come from, etc. So again, we'll allow a minute for that one, Claire, if we could, to see what answers we get.
False. We only got 1 response here. False, and that person thinks it's more.
Okay. Okay, if we answer that question, is this true? It is around about 90%. Despite all the trucks and lorries you see hurtling up and down the M6 and what have you, 90% of it is traded by sea. Okay, good. Thank you. Can we jump on to the next slide then, please, Claire, if we could? So this is kind of the meat of what we kind of wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of the points on here. So to try and expand a little bit on what logistics is, it really is the mechanism and the function which basically keeps food, medicine on shelves in our homes and schools and factories and hospitals and shops. If you think about when you go and you want a new TV, for example, and you go into PC World or Currys, or I'm not sure what they're called these days, it could be PC World Currys, but whatever they're called these days, you decide you want a certain TV, for example, you know that when you get there, there is a choice of this size, that size, flat screen, LCD, etc. All that doesn't happen by magic. Somebody in a logistics function is working out what to make, when to make it, where to stock it, and then of course that has to be physically moved around the countryside to actually be on site when you actually decide you want to go and buy a TV. If you also think about, and a lot of you will probably buy products from Amazon, and you look at how many thousands of products Amazon actually have available. When you go online and order from Amazon, you expect the product to be pretty much in stock, and you expect it to be on your doorstep or at a collection point within a matter of hours. Again, somebody from a logistical point is working out exactly what to buy, what to make, what to stock, where to stock it, and then how to move that product around so it's in the right place at the right time. And that's kind of what logistics effectively is. Also, logistics played a huge part in the vaccine response. It's now, when we first started having the vaccines, not only moving the actual vaccines from A to B to get them into the local place where you went for your vaccine, if you had one or not, but also they played a significant part in setting up what were called the Nightingale hospitals. So there's a lot of materials and equipment that had to be moved around at very, very quick speed to get them positioned in the right places. So logistics does play a significant part in everything that we see and do and our lives effectively. So it effectively keeps the country moving, it keeps the world turning effectively. There is nothing generally that you can think of that hasn't had a logistical input in one way or another to get it from point A to point B to where you intend to actually use it. But what's interesting about logistics, and I think this is where kind of you guys come into some degree, is that logistics is always at the cutting edge of innovation and technology. So yes, we are using traditional methods to move products around. We're using trucks, we're using planes, we're using trains, we're using boats. As we said, 90% travels by boat. Air is generally considered expensive. But moving forward, we are looking at ways of making things like autonomous vehicles. So driverless trucks is being heavily invested in by some big name companies that you will know, the likes of Google and Volvo and BMW. People like this are investing in innovation and technology to look at driverless vehicles. So there's a lot of new roles that will replace traditional driving roles. They'll be replaced with people who can design and build and test and write software for all these types of vehicles. Driverless vehicles are currently in test. They are not as far away as you may think. But what is next in line behind trucks, I've heard people talking about pilotless planes and captainless ships. These are all things that are coming maybe in the future. It may sound a bit sci-fi right now, but it is also a possibility, and it could happen. Also, in terms of robotics, in traditional warehouses that you may have seen where products are stocked before they're moved from point A to point B, you will see a lot of people wandering around, picking products off shelf, driving forklift trucks, all that kind of stuff. That's not always going to be the case. There will be a blend, obviously, for a while. There'll be a hybrid of the models, but going forward, there is significant investment in automated warehouses, robotics. So there'll be robots that will be picking product, packing product, shipping product, there'll be very few people wandering around the warehousing and storage and distribution centres. Now, again, that sounds like it might be far-fetched in the future, but if you go on to Amazon's website, they have many videos showing their automated warehousing systems, and you can even get yourself a tour around the facility to actually see that happen. It's really interesting stuff. But again, from a logistical standpoint, the jobs here are in design and software and technology of various forms. So if that's kind of an interest to you, logistics could be a place to be. But also on more sort of societal levels of interest, obviously when you have a lot of trucks and planes and what have you moving around the globe, there's a big carbon footprint attached to that. So supply chain and logistics again is at the forefront of trying to decarbonize, looking for ways of doing that. So if the environment is something that's particularly close to your heart, and it is for most people and particularly younger people, then this is an area also of particular interest, and a lot of advancement and effort and money has been put into that as a sector. And also, because of all the things I've just said, it is very much an industry that's trying to drive forward, and therefore to be able to do that, it needs to bring in a new, young, diverse demographic of people to help shape logistics for the future. And it won't be, people, who perhaps look more like me, who are working in the logistics world. It's younger people from different backgrounds and different walks of life, etc., that will be able to take it forward. This is what logistics is, and this is what Generation Logistics is particularly aimed at trying to do. Can we move to the next slide, please? So, I want to give you a little bit of time, a few minutes here to perhaps just debate this amongst yourselves. Now you've heard me talk for 20 minutes, I'm sure that's long enough. So maybe just think about, having heard what you've heard, what does logistics now mean to you, and thinking about some of the companies, activities and roles that would be involved. And we're going to elaborate and talk about those in a second, but if I can just give you a few minutes to just talk about that amongst yourselves. Thank you. Just give you one more minute on that if we could, and then we'll move on to the next slide and just expand on some of those points. Okay, let's talk around some of those particular points. If we could just jump to the next slide, please, Claire, then we can explain. So, a lot of you will probably recognise various logistics companies that you may see on the motorway, or you see large warehouses that are on the side of the motorway, whether it be Amazon or some of the big distribution companies. And a lot of those companies named at the top there, some of which are represented on the panel today, but they are on there because they are companies that are heavily involved in logistics, big players in logistics, but they are also sponsors of Generation Logistics. So that's, we kind of put them in there as well. So companies you'll recognise there, in terms of, we've talked about Amazon already, but we know of, we've got a representative from Wincanton on the panel, so we'll hear a little bit more about that later. And we have Stobart. We've all seen Eddie Stobart trucks going up and down the motorway and trying to see what names they've been given. And then you've got shipping companies like Maersk And then you've got supermarkets and Asda are named on there, for example, and amongst others. You can see them on screen. So we talked a little bit about some of the activities involved. So before the customer places an order bit, as I said before, there's a whole sort of supply chain element in play in terms of deciding what to make, when to make, how many to make, how much it costs, how much to charge, to make sure that that is actually in place. So this is a very, very high level, simplistic view of logistics. I'm sure each of us on the panel today could talk about probably each one of those pictures there for about a day or two. But so the customer places the order, they may or may not make payment up front, who knows. Warehouse receives the order. We talked about it being picked, packed, and then shipped. So that's where the truck sets off, or the boat sets, or it goes to the port and it sets sail, etc. Notwithstanding all the customs activity that probably Bobby knows more about. And then the order gets delivered, and then there's a lot of data analysis on the back of it to support all that. Okay, next slide, please. So what this is basically designed to show is, if you look in the very center of any business, the customer should be at the heart of the customer. You only get business because you provide a service that they want to pay for, and they only come back because you provided a good service. But traditionally, what people would associate with logistics is the things we talked about there, the transportation, the warehousing, etc. But as I tried to explain earlier, there is a myriad of functions and roles that orbit around the outside of logistics that are considered to be roles within a logistics function. So if your thing is marketing, if you want to be management consultants, I talked about technology before in terms of robotics, in terms of autonomous vehicles. There's a lot of work being done in what we call back office activities, so data analysis, reporting, using artificial intelligence. A lot of work going on in that area now to get real-time data. If you are an engineer, if you are a designer, a software writer, if you like manufacturing and operational activities, if you have a human resource background, and again, I think one of our panelists had, point of entry was human resource, and Charlotte will probably mention that in a second. If finance is your thing, a lot of numbers involved in terms of costings and forecasting and so on. Heavy reliance on IT and IT infrastructure. So again, if that is your passion and you're leaning, that there's also roots into logistics in that field. And I talked about sustainability. ESG is maybe a phrase that you have or have not heard, but environmental social governance. So sustainability is a large part of that, and all the management around that is particularly important. If you look at it within supply chain logistics, most of the carbon footprint is caused by things outside your own factory, so what they call scope 3 emissions. So that's where the supply chain is kind of working, the logistics industry is working to try and improve that. On the left hand side, we have various ways of entry into the world of logistics. So I'm going to ask the three panelists to talk about each of their entries now, because they've all come in via a different way. We discussed this the other day and it was almost like we planned it. So I'm going to hand over to Sammy, if I could, and perhaps if you could talk about your journey. I've used the J word. I said I wouldn't, but I've used it. If you could talk to us, Sammy, about your roots into the industry.
Yeah, so I left school and we have a family-run heavy haulage business. So it was, I was never pressured to join the business. It was something that naturally happened, and I actually really enjoyed working in the office and out on the road as a HGV driver. So I did my Class 2 and my Class 1 license, so I could drive the HGVs and transport the abnormal loads, load and unload the heavy machinery myself, as well as doing the office role. And then I did my transport management certification and qualification so that I could manage the transport and run the reports to manage all the drivers. So I've got quite a wide range of skills that I can do, and off the back of that I've left the family business so that I can continue learning and doing qualifications outside of that to work for myself and help other companies become compliant. So yeah, I've had a different journey than the other guys to get where I'm at now, and I am self-employed, so I work for myself, but continuing for this professional development and doing qualifications regularly outside of an employment for somebody is what I love doing. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Thank you, Sammy. Sammy is quite modest. If you look Sammy up online, she's had a very interesting and diverse range of roles. I advise you to check her out when you've got some free time. Very, very interesting. I'm going to ask perhaps Charlotte, perhaps now if you could explain your J-word journey again, please, if you would.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go right back to the start. So very much I went to university. I did English, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and I ended up in HR, as mentioned before. It was just a job I took at university. I worked my way up in that essentially, and then went back to university and did my master's in it, which I really enjoyed. I started to apply for all different graduate schemes. I knew I wanted to do a graduate scheme because you get really good visibility in those, and essentially the only ones that were getting back to me were logistics. So essentially I think logistics chose me. And I thought, no problem, I'll go ahead and do it, this will be fun. And I've never looked back. I've really enjoyed it. So I am now 1.5 years into my 2-year graduate scheme, and I've worked in all different areas of the business. So I've worked in really automated warehouses, as Gary mentioned before, with robots going everywhere, everything's flying around you on pallets and totes. And then I've worked in transport, working with drivers and actually managing my own team within that, which has been absolutely fabulous. I love transport. And now I'm working in another warehouse before I return back into HR. Graduate scheme is a great way to enter the business because you do get to experience every single aspect, and those really important aspects as well.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you very much. So I'd like to also ask Bobby the same question to talk about her entry into the world of logistics. If you could pick up from there, Bobby.
Yeah, I started my career journey as an apprentice. I did actually do my first year in sixth form, but I wasn't sure I wanted to carry on with the qualifications I was doing. I was also working 2 jobs because I really like making money. And by the time I got to the second year, I just decided it's not for me. I want to drop out. Little did I know that year the law had changed where you had to stay in education until you were 18. So I decided to just apply for a few random apprenticeships, ride it out and then do full-time work. And I found logistics, which gave me 2 degrees in business, which is actually what I wanted to do going into sixth form. And since then, I've been able to build on that. And now I'm 5 years into my journey doing customs still. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think what's interesting is that there are multiple routes into the industry. I think, as Charlotte said, sometimes logistics finds you rather than you finding it. But I think in more recent times, it's become much more regarded as a profession with professional qualifications. I know, for example, near to where I live, Keele University is just about to launch its first undergraduate supply chain logistics management course. There are a number of those institutions doing that. I think Huddersfield, Cardiff, amongst others, all have now professional qualifications in supply chain logistics. So that's a fairly new thing. I think when I was probably first starting out in my career, I don't think the word logistics even existed. We called it something else. I think distribution or something probably at that point. My entry into it really is also quite similar. I describe myself as a failed musician. Effectively, I was a musician in the 80s and it didn't work out, so I had to get a real job. So I went to work in a warehouse in a clothing factory where my dad worked, and then worked my way up through purchasing roles into end-to-end supply chain management roles. And as a consequence, I've been very lucky to have literally traveled the world in my career. I've worked for a year in San Francisco. I've worked in Taiwan, Singapore, Australia, most of Europe, and now Stoke-on-Trent. Okay, so good. Can we jump to the next slide, please, Claire, if you could? So in the interest of time, we're not going to go into the website today, but I do encourage you to make a note of the website. I assume this recording will be made available to you. So, but if you go onto this slide, beg your pardon, onto this website, you'll see a little bit about what we've been talking about today. You will also see in the tab there that's called Stories. If you just jump to the next slide for me, Claire, you will see a link to all these different stories from young professionals, and you can basically read about their individual stories. I say if we had a bit more time, we could have wandered around the website together today, but as usual, I've talked too much, so we won't be able to do that. But please, if you are interested and want to investigate a little bit more and hear some more stories other than what we've heard from Charlotte, Sammy and Bobby thus far, then feel free to wander around the website. Next slide, please. I sound like Chris Whitty, don't I? Next slide, please. So why should you work in logistics? One, really, it is actually a well-paid career. There is a career path where you can advance quickly and in all sorts of different directions and different areas. As Charlotte says, she was in HR and now in logistics, and Bobby was doing business and is now in working in sort of the customs area and so on and so forth. And Sammy herself was working in her own family haulage firm, now doing something. You do quite a lot of auditing as well, don't you, various things and stuff, Sammy? So there's various routes. So it is a well-paid profession as you move along the career path. It is a secure industry. We're always going to need logistics in one form or another. As I say, it may advance from people walking around warehouses to robots, and it may evolve from people driving trucks to driverless trucks, but there's still a whole industry required behind that. You can advance quickly. It's not a straight line, so you don't have to sort of, if you decide you want to be something, you can zigzag your way to that point. You can change direction, but still stay within the logistics world. It is flexible. It is very forward thinking, in my view, in terms of hybrid working. If that's you can't drive a truck from home, I guess, but hybrid working in terms of flexibility. And in terms of the open to everyone, it is really pushing forward in terms of equity and equality, diversity and inclusion are big topics within the logistics industry. And as I say, for not only being the right thing to do from a societal point of view, it's of course necessary to take the industry forward. I can't design robots, but young people like yourselves may be able to design robots, for example. So it is a career that has longevity to it, and it is open and available to every one of you. So come and join logistics. Next slide, please. Oh, good. So that takes us really to the end of the presentation. I did want to allow 15 minutes, which is perfect, for questions and answers. So perhaps, Claire, if you could start monitoring the chat to see what questions come in. In the meantime, yeah. I'll ask Sammy, Bobby, and Charlotte just to add some thoughts if they may. So
yeah,
perhaps
absolutely.
So Sammy, while I wait for questions to come in, perhaps you could say how you find the industry as being a young female who was driving a truck. How did you find that?
I guess I often get told that you don't look like a driver. So when I turn up in a big abnormal load, 100-ton crane or a wind turbine blade on the back of the extended low loader trailer, I often get told, oh, I didn't expect you don't look like a lorry driver. But here I am. I'm doing the job because I love it. Absolutely love showing the men that anybody can do their job, and when they complain that it's too difficult or they're struggling, I love to be the one to say, well, I'll come and help you. And if you can't do it, then because unfortunately I'm a member of the family business, then somebody's got to do that job. So I love the challenge of someone not being able to do it and then me coming to help, or doing it myself and just saying, if you can't do it, no problem, someone's got to do it. So here I am. So I love being part of the whole journey in terms of when a customer books a transport moving, I'm often the one on the phone that books it in, takes the payment, plans the work with all the drivers. Often I go and do the job myself, and then I send them the invoice, and then thank you very much, customer service, is everything okay? See you next time. So I love the fact that I can do every part of the job from start to finish. And as well as that, I do independent audits for companies that are in trouble with the traffic commissioner. So I help them put a plan in place to get them compliant and help them. And I also am a course tutor for driver CPC courses, so the qualifications that they need to keep their job and drive as a professional driver. I do courses as well. So there's lots of transferable skills. So you never, it's great progression that you'll never really need to leave the industry. You know, if you fancy a change, you can just use all the experience and knowledge you've got to branch out on another part of logistics. So that's what I love about it. Career progression is almost unlimited. You can take it wherever you like, and it's a different challenge every single day. So I absolutely love it.
So a question I had for you on the driving side, I think last time I saw some figures, it was like less than 2% of drivers are currently female, and I think you're leading the charge to try and increase that. Are you seeing more young women coming forward to want to gain their license to be drivers? Are you actually seeing a noticeable change?
Yeah, I certainly am. And I mean, it's a difficult industry to get into if you haven't got anybody to look up to. I had no females as a young person when I was 18 passing my HGV. I have nobody to look up to say, oh, they're doing the job that I really, you know, that I'm wanting to do. I had nobody as a vision to say that I was able to achieve anything. It just happened with me gaining experience. So I want to be the role model that says I have done all those massive abnormal loads and all the stuff that most blokes say is difficult work. I've done that as a woman. So I'd love to be the role model for young people to say, if you really want to do it and you love a challenge, then there are, you know, I want to tell you that it's possible and that it has been done before, and that as long as you are determined and you like a challenge, you don't mind getting your hands dirty, then, you know, this industry will, it's just a really great industry. And there are a lot of women coming through, especially on the courses that I'm teaching. I have a lot of women that hang about at the end of the course and then ask questions about how they can get into the heavy haulage side or different sides of it. So yeah, I can definitely see the world is changing from when I started.
Thanks, Sammy. Do we have any questions from the audience, Claire?
We do indeed, yeah. I'm
Okay.
just conscious of time. That was I really appreciated you taking the time for that little sort of bit of information there. So yeah, given that it's National Apprenticeship Week, it's only fitting that we have an apprenticeship linked question. So
sure.
First one is, it's amazing obviously to see the different pathways into logistics, but what would the normal application process be for somebody wanting to undertake an apprenticeship?
Okay, who wants to take that? Do you want to take that, Bobby or Charlotte?
Yeah, I can take that.
Okay, Bobby.
For me, I literally just went on Indeed and looked for apprenticeships. The other ways you can do it is go on LinkedIn and find recruiters who specify in the logistics world. But it really does depend on what sector of logistics you want to get into. When I filled out my application, it was just maths and English that you really needed. And back then it was a lot different to what it was now. I had no idea what freight was. I remember in my first interview, I was Googling what it was, because it's still not talked about enough in school. So I think as long as you prepare yourself for the job that you're applying for and make sure you've got the baseline qualifications, it's just about finding that job role, and you can do that by LinkedIn, Indeed, all those other avenues.
That actually leads really nicely, actually, Bobby, if you don't mind continuing in that vein around, you were saying there in terms of preparation, so it puts you in the right position for when you do come to apply. What subjects at school do you think would be most suitable to take? What would put you in a good position going forward to apply for those kind of roles?
Again, depending on the sector you want to go into. For customs, maybe business, accounting. If you wanted to do more sales, you should maybe look into media and negotiations. Maths is a huge part of, I think, logistics in all the different sectors. But yeah, just try and figure out maybe what would be needed from that role, because it's such a wide variety of different roles that you could get into. It could really be anything.
I think if I could add there as well, please, Claire, if I could. I think as well as sort of your English and maths and things, and the things that Bobby has talked about, and I think Sammy referred to transferable skills. So you need to be, an effective communicator, good at teamwork, good at problem solving. Those types of employability skills are almost of equally importance if you are going in at a junior level. I think those alongside the technical aspects are really important too.
Yeah, and it quite often it's the case that for certain job roles, employers won't necessarily be too not bothered, but they're not too kind of focused on what qualifications you've got, but the skills that you've developed and the skills that you know you need to address. And
Absolutely.
obviously employers are quite happy to work with that as a mold to get the right person, I suppose.
I saw some data recently and it said what is the number one thing employers are looking for when somebody young and new joins the company, and I think it was turning up was the number one thing. So that ability to be reliable and dependable and turn up on time, and then of course you add on to that things like willingness to learn and all that kind of stuff I've just referred to really. So yeah, some of the qualifications, Bobby's right. If you're going down perhaps a more mathematical route on forecasting or accounting or some sort of financial route, then obviously maths and things of that nature are important. But I think it's a little bit horses for courses really, because it is such a diverse industry in terms of the job roles. But I think if you display some of the basic fundamentals, as we say, maths, English, and then some of the interpersonal skills to support that, I think you could find your way quite easily into logistics, I would believe.
Right.
Charlotte, I mean, you were doing HR and then you, pardon the pun, jump ship into logistics. So how did you find that? How did you find you were received in the world of logistics?
Oh, I felt it went absolutely fine, to be honest. Those transferable skills went across quite well. I had I went into HR because I, bit of a people person. I enjoy working with people. That's why I went into it. But those skills are needed in every aspect of logistics. You're working with really large teams all the time, teams that are on the road as well, and how do you engage those people? You're constantly thinking those questions. So me coming into the more operations side of it, being feet on the ground, transferred pretty well. I felt I took those skills right over, and I can go back quite easily as well.
Okay, perfect. What else do we have from the audience, Claire, please?
I've got one here. Very important question. Some people avoid it, but we're going to go there. What kind of a salary or what kind of a training allowance could an apprenticeship anticipate to earn maybe in the first year after leaving school, or indeed leaving college after they've maybe done a couple of years of further education?
Okay, is that for you, Bobby or Charlotte? Have you wish to answer?
As an apprentice leaving with no idea what rate was, I think my first year I was on 21,000, and that went up every single year. And obviously I got taxed less because it wasn't as much, but it was more than minimum wage at my part-time job, so I was happy.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. I think that's all the questions we've got. I'm just going to give another second just to check. Okay. I've got one for you, if you don't mind, and it's something that we
Please,
obviously in the role that we've got with schools and colleges is kind of the importance of work experience or work placements. And I just wondered if anybody's got anything to offer in terms of whether you think that's valuable in terms of going into logistics in the future.
I'll start off on that one if I can, and the ladies can add to it if they see fit. I think work experience does give you, in whatever career you ultimately end up in. Obviously we're here trying to coerce you all into going into logistics, but whatever career you want to go into, having some form of work experience is actually a differentiator and advantage on your CV, if you like, compared to other people who haven't got it. Because as I say, it's not always necessarily about the exact job role you go into or even the industry you go into. To some degree, it kind of proves to an employer that you sort of can get up regularly at stupid o'clock in the morning and find your way to a factory or an office or a warehouse or whatever it may be, and follow the rules, follow the processes, and interact with a wide range of different people. In any business there are men, women, young, old, people of different persuasions, different sexuality, different heritage, different social, different neuro backgrounds, etc., etc. So giving evidence that you can perform in those circumstances is actually a differentiator and advantage in my view. I don't know if you would agree with that. Charlotte, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, of course, I can add to that. We have had work experience come to some of our distribution centres, and there's loads of opportunities to do it. It's always the health and safety aspect of working in a warehouse or anything, but it's absolutely fine to come and do your week or 2 weeks work experience. We've had a lot of people You can come shadow anyone, and there's loads of roles to be able to do it. If you're interested in HR, you can come help out the HR department, marketing, anything. Yeah, lots of opportunities within different distribution centres, and we're all over the country as well.
That's great. Thanks very much. Okay, well, I think that kind of brings us to the end, everybody. So thank you so much, Gary, Bobby, Sammy and Charlotte.
Pleasure.
That was really interesting and so interesting. I think it's quite staggering that, you know, it is such a growth sector and yet there's actually maybe not as much known about it. So I think you've really helped us there in conveying a message to schools and colleges that it's definitely a sector for young people to be aware of and take notice of in terms of future opportunities. I've learned a lot from that myself, really, and hopefully we'll be able to impart that on the careers leaders that we support across Greater Manchester. And I'm sure you guys out there have learned a lot too. Students, not just students, teachers, maybe even parents have had the benefit of that this morning. So I think it definitely enables your students to think a little bit more, in a little bit more detail about the possibilities in the logistics sector. Thanks to everybody out there in schools and colleges, or you might be at home. Really hoping that you found that session useful. Don't forget that you can keep up to date with all things Meet Your Future at GMAX, and I'm going to get Sarah to just pop a link on the screen there for you. GMAX, if you don't already know, is the Greater Manchester Apprenticeship and Career Service platform, and this is a place where you can find out lots and lots of information about careers, apprenticeships and various opportunities, learning pathways, etc. For you for the future. And many of you will probably already be using GMAX or certainly be aware of it. If you're not and you'd like to, do please speak to your teacher at school who deals with careers, and they can obviously let you know more about that. You'll probably see on the screen there in front of you, there's a large QR code. We're asking you to use that as a means of giving us some feedback. Obviously don't want to get anybody into any trouble. If you're in school and phones aren't allowed, then perhaps teachers could be aware of that, and we'll also be sending out to schools and colleges for feedback. So don't worry too much if you can't do it through the QR method. It's important to us that we get feedback because obviously we really want to give you the best possible information and awareness sessions, obviously, that Meet Your Future tries to provide. So do let us know if it was useful, tell us if there's anything we could tweak or make better for the future, and we'll definitely take that on board. So all that leaves me to say is, once again, thank you so much to our wonderful speakers. Thanks to you, Sarah, for making sure the tech worked in the background in the end. And indeed, once again, to everybody out there in schools and colleges, thank you so much for being with us. Have a lovely and fantastic Wednesday, and we really hope to catch up with you all soon for another workshop or session with Meet Your Future. Bye, everybody.